Hello, my friends. Welcome to Miss Mo's Vegan Kitchen. I am Miss Mo. Tonight, I bring you kind of like a leftover smorgasbord, although the baked beans are brand new. So we've got some shepherd's pie, gardener's pie, broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, and some baked beans. Oh, man. It's so good. How many of you like baked beans? I grew up on them. So my mom would have them going in the crock pot. And it was just such a welcoming smell when you walked in the house. And we would always have baked beans with like cooked sausages. It was a side if it was a big meal. But so it would be baked beans, cooked sausages, mashed potatoes, some kind of veggie. And always, like always, homemade bread. My mom would bake. Oh my goodness, probably, I want to say, at least 30 loaves of bread at a time. Maybe more sometimes. So I think I've talked about it a little bit before in another video. My mom was born in Nigwak, New Brunswick. So she's of Acadian heritage. She was born a Vautour. So my grandmother was a Camel. My grandfather was a Vautour. And we have Savoie, Thibodeau, basically down east, almost all of the French Acadian names are related in some sense of the word. And the Acadian French is broken. So what that means is that most Acadians spoke French and English in their own homes as well. So if they didn't understand a word in French or know the meaning, they would just say it in English. So that was why it was called broken. So my mom grew up making everything at home. There was a mercantile store literally next door to them. And what that is, I should move this closer, I guess. I'm not leaning forward, sorry. A mercantile is like an everything store. I don't know if there are any that exist nowadays, but it was still around when I was a kid. Up until, I think, my teen years. And you could go there, and you could get, like, say if I wanted to make this meal. I could get all of these ingredients there. And I wanted to make deviled eggs. I could get my fresh eggs there. Although, to be honest, most families down east raise chickens for their own eggs. So, some mercantiles didn't even sell them. They had a fabric if you wanted to sew. They had nails if you needed a hammer or fix something. They had all of your pots and pans. They had small home furnishings, not large things unless you ordered them in. They had your dairy. They had literally everything. Because most of the families, the husband worked in the mines. Or on the farm. So it needed to be super convenient if you wanted people to shop at your store. And it was just so amazing. Literally, like, live by the land, die by the land. So, my grandpa had acres and acres and acres of farm. So we would go out. On the one side of the house, he had his chickens for his eggs and meat. On the other side, it was all berry trees, well, berry bushes, cherry trees, crab apples, for miles. In the front, there was also cherry trees. When the train would go right by their house, I loved it so much. The sound of a train is so comforting to me. So my grandmother would be in the kitchen from morning to night. So we grew up the same way. Except my mom worked. My grandmother worked in the home. So, oh my gosh, I just realized that I had a regular spoon, but oh well. So my grandmother worked in the home. My mom worked outside of the home. But we were taught from very, very young how to cook. My mom is my reason for loving cooking. My dad too, but more my mom. Because my dad was more, he was on the go all the time. My mom was always home with us, baking, cooking, doing the household stuff. So, until she got sick. So, when I was really young, when we made our Christmas baking, excuse me, or our cooking for the year, we would do massive amounts of things. Like I said, we would make like 30 loaves of bread at a time. And we would do tortillas, which is traditional meat pies. Obviously, I don't eat those now. If I was to do bread, I would have to do vegan, gluten-free. Not the same. Not even close. I have made it. It's okay. But it's nowhere near good old-fashioned white bread. Man, do I ever miss that. Anyway. So we would have these loaves of bread rising all over the house because we have hot water rads. So we would just have, and we had covers that were like made out of this really fancy decorator wood. And the top was flat. So we would have these loaves of bread sitting all over the rad covers. It was so cool. And that was our present when we went to people's house to visit. So we would always bring a tortilla or a loaf of bread and some homemade cookies, sometimes baked beans. So it's just old-fashioned tradition, basically. And I've raised Axel that way. That you do not go to somebody's house visiting empty-handed or uninvited. You always show up with something. So, the baked beans are such a childhood memory. Unfortunately, for those of you who've been watching me for a while now, you know that my mom passed away in 2017. And today I joined was it today or yesterday? I'm not sure, but I joined a new group on Facebook for meals, vegan meals to help combat depression. And I've been very, very open about my mental health and how I went through serious depression. I should have went for help, but I didn't. I'm very, very thankful that I made it through it, because I was not in a good way for many years. My house showed it. My heart showed it. I just wasn't in the right place at the right time. Most days were a struggle. There were good days, obviously, but more bad days at the time. And it all started when my mom got diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to try not to cry through this video, but I cannot guarantee, because I'm in a much better place now, thankfully. So, my mom is one of the reasons why I'm a mental health advocate. My mom suffered her whole entire life with manic depression, bipolar. That makes me more sad than her actual death, because my mom suffered tremendously, and we had to become advocates for her because the system is messed up. So sometimes she would go to the hospital after a mental breakdown, nervous breakdown, and they would turn her away. It doesn't make any sense, because she was very open about her mental health most of the time. If she wasn't on a high or a low, if she was somewhere in the middle, she was very open about it. And if she was on a high or a low, she would deny it, obviously, because she was not in the right space. She was clinically diagnosed when I was only 12. And to say that it was a living hell is not far from the truth. My mom tried many medications because, unfortunately, with severe cases, sometimes not even that severe, when you are on medication, your body tends to get used to it after a while. and it doesn't work. So sometimes they have to switch your cocktail and try and find what works for you. So my mom struggled a lot. She did her best, and she was an amazing person. So beautiful and pure of heart, and so loving to not just us, but to everybody, and just wanted to make sure that everybody was taken care of. So I try and do the same. She had fallen. Her health was kind of deteriorating, and she was not doing well. So when my parents retired and moved up north, Axel was only 3, so 18 years ago. She had already retired at that point and wasn't working anymore. And she was on, I believe at that time she was on lithium. And it was working for a while, and then it stopped working, so then they had to start playing around with her medication again. And then when they do that, it can take months, sometimes even years, to find your right mix, and then it'll last a couple of years, and then they have to change it again because she would have a nervous breakdown. In the end, I'm very thankful that for the last at least decade of her life, she was on Wellbutrin, also known as Zyban, and it was her magic drug. It worked amazingly. Even when it would go off, they could put her back on and just mess with the dose of it. So when we were growing up, there would be times where she would call us and she would be lost because her brain just didn't function that day the proper way. And she would have to, I'm just thankful that she would remember our phone number somehow, some way. I don't know if she had it written down, because I never ever saw it in a book or something. And then she would, because she did, she had books with numbers just written in them randomly with no names to them and all over the place. And she would have just so much, because her brain was so busy and overworked sometimes and trying to figure everything out, that she would just start writing stuff down to try and help. So 8 years ago, she fell off of the porch at the cottage. And I'm jumping from her mental health to her cancer diagnosis. I'm sorry, but I don't want this video to be super, super long. Maybe one time I'll do them separately. But I wanted to get everything in this one this time. Kind of like as a tribute to my mom. On her birthday or on her angelversary, I will do a special video just dedicated to her. So, maybe both. She fell and she broke her wrist. So when she went in to get her wrist set, they were doing an overall health check on her. And the doctors noticed something on her foot. A big black mark. And the doctor asked her if she knew what it was, and she said no. And she said, but I noticed it after I fell. And he said, oh, okay, well, I don't think that they're correlated or anything. Is that the right word for that? I'm sorry if it's not. So they did a biopsy, and they found out that it was cancer. So they took out, it's called an ulcer in the foot. So they took that out, and it looked like everything was going to be okay. Well, it didn't heal. And it kept growing. The cells weren't working properly. They weren't healing properly. So at one point, they had taken some skin off of her leg to fix her foot, and it just wouldn't work. It wasn't working at all, and it was just getting worse. And then they started doing more blood work and more tests and more scans and everything like that to see how the rest of her body was doing. And it wasn't doing so well. So she had to go through a lot of stuff. Treatments, chemo, radiation. And that lasted 5 years. And she had her lymph nodes removed because the cancer was traveling through her lymph nodes. And in the very, very end, it traveled to her brain. And the end was horrible. I was there. Our whole family was there. My mom was very, very loved by many people because she was just so caring and loving to other people. So it was definitely reciprocated back to her. But that started my depression. Her diagnosis with cancer, because my mom was my best friend. And it was so hard to see her suffer. My dad suffered as well, obviously. My parents have been together since they were teenagers. And they were best friends. They had been through a lot in their marriage. I have 2 brothers, so they had 3 children. And then my mom with her mental health. So when she got diagnosed with cancer, I kind of sunk into a depression. But I was functioning. I still managed my life okay. But I kind of just went to dark places. And then as her cancer progressed and got worse, so did my depression. While she was alive, I just remember I had to talk to her every day, visited often. My parents moved to the cottage to retire. It's about 2 hours away. So we would go and visit them, or they would come here. My mom had to go to Sunnybrook for treatments, which is in Toronto. So they would come here and stay when she was doing that. Sometimes for a week, sometimes for days, sometimes for longer. And then when she actually passed away, I just really sunk. I was angry at the world. I was angry at God. I was angry at the doctors. I was angry at everything. And I didn't know how to deal with that. So there were days where I didn't want to get up. There were days where, even when I did, I didn't want to do anything. I lost 1.5 years of my memories because I was in breathe and survive mode, I call it. That was all I could do, was just breathe and survive and make it through that day. I'm very thankful that my family was here, even though they didn't understand it. Because if I didn't have that, I honestly don't know if I would be here. My love for my husband and my son kept me alive. And I made it. That's all that matters. None of why it happened or none of how it happened matters right now. It mattered a lot at the time. And the only thing that got me out of it was cooking. So I started to talk about what I liked to do with my mom, to my husband, and to my son. And my favorite childhood memories were just sitting in the kitchen with my mom, and singing at the top of our lungs sometimes, and cooking and baking. It was my happy time and my happy place, and I missed that. I missed being able to just be creative in the kitchen, and you're so in a zone that it's like you're flying high. It's your drug of choice at the time, right? So I started to slowly cook again with heart, if that makes any sense. I hope it does to you, because it does to me. So that's all that matters in that sense of the word as well. And it started to make me feel better. So I started to want to get up again, and I started to want to take care of myself again. I wanted to, the simple fact of showering some days was too much for me to handle when I was in that breathe and survive mode. Didn't matter. So I started to want to take care of myself again. And when you think of the fact that when my depression started, I had only been with Kevin for 2 years. So he has been through 8 years of me depressed, and now we're at the 10-year mark. And he is amazing. He stuck with me through it, and I'm very thankful. That kind of love is hard to find sometimes. And I'm so blessed and grateful to the universe for providing what we have together, because we are each other's hugest support system. So I started to put music on and sing. And sometimes you don't know the word, but it doesn't matter. So as you can see, just from my mood right now, talking about singing and cooking back the way I used to when I was a kid brings me so much joy. And my mental health started to improve. And I started to look at things differently again. Instead of always what was wrong with it, I would find what was right with it. And that for me was huge, because I knew how bad of a place I was in. And I knew that I was lucky to be here and that I made it through that. Because when I was in that breathe and survive mode, there were days where I didn't want to continue. And I didn't want to be here. And I didn't want to see tomorrow. I didn't even want to see the next minute. So cooking really did pull me out of that. And then I decided that since I loved it so much, that I was going to make that my happiness. And I was going to strive to survive now. Instead of just being able to breathe and survive, I was going to love every minute of my life. And I was going to turn around what was bad and make everything good. And here I am, 2 years later. I am in such a beautiful, happy place right now. And I mean, I'm not going to say that every moment of every day is beautiful as far as my mental health goes, because there are days that I struggle. But those times are so minimal now, and I'm able to pull myself out of it so fast now because I've found joy and I've found my heart again. So sometimes it is really the simple things that we overlook that make us happy. And sometimes it is just going back to one memory, even just one memory that made you happy, reliving that moment, because it can spark a little something in you that hopefully is a domino effect. And then you'll think of another memory that made you happy, and you'll do that thing too. It might not work for everybody, but I really hope that something in what I'm saying will spark something in you if you are in a depressive state that can help you get out of it. And, you know, some people might not think that that's the right thing for them, and that's okay, because we aren't all the same, and definitely not the same thing works for everybody. So this is what worked for me. So now I decided to make a business out of my cooking. I wanted to share my love of food and my love of healthy eating and my joy that I get from it with other people. So I've been vegan now for, I thought it was 10 years, but we were looking back on videos and it's about 8.5 to 9 years. Not that that makes a difference as far as this goes, but the reason why I went vegan when I look back at it is probably mostly because of Charlie. I've always been an empath, severe empath, to the point where sometimes when I was eating meat or anything animal related, because we grew up slaughtering our own animals to that extent. We were fishermen and fisherwomen, fisher folks. And we, you know, some of my relatives have farms, so we grew up that way. And I would literally eat the things, whatever it was, and I would cry. Because I was absorbing all of the pain, all of the energy, and all of the bad feelings that came from these animals being on my plate. And I didn't understand it as a child. I didn't know how to express what I was saying, but that's why I gave up certain things all the time in my life to try and not feel that. So I gave up veal when I was really young. And then I gave up red meat. And then I gave up dairy. And then finally I gave up everything else because I was like, why am I saying that only poultry and fish I can eat? That doesn't make any sense to me, where they're still animals and they're still sentient creatures and they can still feel and they can still feel the pain. And I was absorbing all of that every time that I took a bite of their flesh, and it didn't make any sense to me. And that really played on my mental health because I was taking in all this negative energy. So I'm surprised that I managed to stay vegan all of the years of being in the depressive state, to be honest, because my mind just wasn't in the right frame of mind. So that definitely helped me because I think, I don't know how to explain it, but I think if I wasn't vegan, I would have been in a worse way. So yeah, I started to want to help other people and teach them how to cook this beautiful vegan meals. So that's how it started. So I decided to enroll in a vegetarian culinary course at George Brown. I did an entrepreneurship course first, but I don't remember very much of it because I was still just coming out of my depressive state. Sorry if this is annoying you, but obviously, I know my nose is running from crying. So I enrolled in culinary college, and within a few minutes when I told Axel, he said that he wanted to join as well. And I was so excited because I was so thinking about the fact that, you know, my son was going to actually enjoy cooking as much as I do and have that love for it that I do. That just makes you feel like you're just in a zone when you're cooking and you're just loving it and floating through life. And it just really feels like what you're doing becomes part of the music that you hear. And the movements are all flowing, and the food that you create is just part of you, and you share your love and you share your energy, all good energy now because you're in such a good space, and you're sharing that with other people. And just like I used to absorb the bad energy from the food, now we're absorbing all this good energy from the food, and you're feeding their soul and you're loving that person. And you know, I always grew up with really loving people, and we didn't really say I love you in my house, which is, it sounds very odd to say that, but I think that my parents just weren't comfortable with it. So as I grew up, I didn't understand why we didn't say it all the time. Because as soon as I had all children in my life, even the children that I babysit, I would always say I love you. To my friends, I always said I love you. And my parents were so uncomfortable with saying it. So I'm not really sure where that stemmed from, but I changed that for them. I just constantly was saying I love you to them. And then they started to say it back every once in a while. And then they started to say it back more often. And then they started to say it all the time. And, you know, it's really something that can change you. It's trained behavior to not love yourself or to love yourself. So you need to practice loving yourself if you don't. And I learned that. I'm still learning that. It's definitely a learning process because I think as humans, we learn every day. You're supposed to learn every day. That's how you become a better human. And I think that my food is just absolute energy. And I want to share that with the world. I want to share my mental health with the world. I want everybody to know that it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to admit that you need help. When our house was decluttering, I felt so embarrassed for years to even have people step into my home because I wasn't in the mood to clean, not because I didn't want to, but because my mental health just couldn't handle it. Like, I would look at something and instantly become overwhelmed. And I would just look at it. And then I would say, okay, I need to deal with that. But then I couldn't. Because I didn't know where to start. And I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't know where I was going to end up. So I would just leave it. And then it got to the point where it was really bad. And Kevin was scared to clean it because he was scared to hurt my feelings or upset me because he knew that I wasn't in a good space. So, you know, he was walking on eggshells all that time. So finally what happened was I just said to him, I think I'm ready. And he was like, what does that even mean? I said, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to actually call in some help. And he was like, I got you. Like, my friends have been offering to help, so I'll just call them and they will come. And I was like, are you sure? He said, yes. And I said, okay, the only thing that I ask is that you don't throw anything away that my mom gave me. Everything else is pretty much free game. So they came in and I had to leave and they started. And it was amazing. Honestly, I can't thank them enough. It was so freeing and so... It just started me wanting to do it as well and make my space enjoyable and relaxing, because when it's cluttered like that, I was so stressed out. I don't know if you feel the same way, but when your home is organized, or at least my home is organized, I feel so comfortable and relaxed and able to sit down and not be stressed out about where should I start, where should I move next. And it's definitely not finished. It's going to take us probably the whole year to get it where I want it to be. But that's okay. Not this year, next year. Because we only started this month. So we have gotten so much done in the last 3 weeks. It's been amazing. And I just want you to know that I came out of that dark place. And I really, really hope that you can too. And it's okay to not be okay. Mental health is rarely talked about. There's such a stigma attached to it, and people are ashamed of it. But we shouldn't be. We're all the exact same. We're all human, and we all make mistakes, and we all have problems. And hopefully we can get better. But if we can't, we should be there for each other. I'm here for you. If you need me, I can try and help. I can't say that I can help every problem, but I can sure do what I can. And this has been a really long video, and I didn't think that I was going to record it because it's super late or early in the morning. But I needed to. I needed to get that off of my chest, and I needed to say thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you so much. I love you. You're welcome in our home anytime. Because strangers are just friends that you haven't met yet. I love you again. I love you. I love you. I love you. You need to hear that as many times as I can say it to you in a day. And you need to know that I mean it. Thank you for watching. Peace. Keep smiling.